Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to week 47, believe it or not, of our weekly stitch along for 2024. Before I get into what we're going to do this week, I just want to mention a couple of things. One is, a few of you have been asking about next year. There will be a weekly project next year, a little bit different to what we've been doing this year, but there will be a weekly project, so I hope you like the idea of that. And the other thing is, quite a few new people have come in recently, I think from the journaling video, which I'll also talk about as we go along, and asked about the videos for the year, for this year's project. Those videos will stay, I'm not taking them down, so if you want to, if you're new here and you want to follow that project on your own time, then, go for it. Lovely, thank you. So this week, I'm taking another suggestion. Oh, by the way, I'm at my kitchen table because last Wonky Wednesday I sat here with the natural light from the window, and I've got this old quilt, which you'll have seen if you watch Park Home Life, and I had a lot of positive feedback about it, and some of you even said you didn't like the green cloth. I wish you'd said it earlier. The green cloth that I normally put down on the table. So anyway, I'll sit here in the kitchen. I've got Fred. I'm not very comfortable because Fred is sitting behind me. I got up to go and get my journal, and I came back and he was in my chair. Anyway, so he may or may not make an appearance at one point. So this week is we're going to do wrinkle embroidery, or wrinkle stitch. Let's call it wrinkle stitching. That's less challenging than using the word embroidery, because we're not going to do anything formal, or at least I'm not. This was suggested to me by Fiona, who sent me a message asking if I'd heard of this artist, and actually I was following her on Instagram, this person. She's called Bonnie Sennott. I believe she's in Massachusetts, and she's a knitwear designer, but she also does beautiful stitching on linen. And one of the things she does is this, what she calls wrinkle embroidery. So what you'll need is a piece of, now I've got linen. Now if you don't have linen, you want, get cotton or something, but I would say something plain, one colour. Doesn't have to be neutral necessarily, but then obviously choose your threads accordingly. But it wants to be something that will hold creases when you scrunch it up, so not a polypolyester or anything like that. So you could do a little experiment, crumple it in your hand and see if it holds the creases. Now this piece of linen, you will see, is pristine. I have ironed it because I want the wrinkles that I make when I scrunch it to be evident. And while I was ironing it, I thought, we're doing wrinkles, oh the irony. And then I realised I'd made a word joke, and I had a little chuckle to myself. So anyway, irony, I ironed, and we're going to wrinkle it again. So I've got that. When I've done the wrinkly bit, I'm going to stitch it onto a little back cloth, just because I like to stitch with two cloths. Now when I see Bonnie's Instagram feed, which I'll link, in the description, if you click on the little word more under the video, I'll link you to her Instagram. I see that she stitches on a single layer in a hoop, so if you're happier doing that, then you go for it. But I'm going to base to a back cloth. And I've also got some threads of different kinds. Oh, Fred's jumped down. I can get more comfy. Thank you, Fred. What was I saying? Threads. Yes, I've got some neutrals in different weights. I don't know what I'm going to use. I've got some Valdani, which is 8 weight cotton pearl. I've got some silk dyed with onion skins by my lovely friend Wendy. That's just some generic embroidery floss, which I've tea dyed, I think, but it's a nice muted colour. And this is some silk that was sent to me by, oh goodness me, a lady in Scotland. Was it Jill? Apologies, Jill, if it wasn't Jill. But anyway, it's silk naturally dyed. So some thread, some linen, a back cloth if you like, a hoop if you just want to go with a single layer, obviously a needle, and I've got the snippies. So I have never done this before. I thought of having a practice, but then I thought, nope, let's just go for it and we'll do it all together. I stitch a lot when I stitch on eco prints, where I follow the shapes of the eco prints with, I let the shapes of the eco prints inspire the stitching, and this kind of made me think of that, and I had that on my list actually, you know, of things to do with you. But then not all of you have eco prints. Sorry, there's cat food on the tablecloth distracting me somewhat. Not all of you have eco prints, obviously, and commercial prints are often regular prints, aren't they? Unless you buy something indie dyed, or you know, or you dye something yourself indie dyed. So I just thought this was a lovely way to do it, you know, which was hopefully accessible to everybody. So I'm going to get my bit of linen, and I'm not going to really crumple it like mad. I just want some creases, and I'm not going to control it in any way. I'm just going to screw it up in my hand and squeeze, and then see what I get, which is obviously a crumpled bit of linen. And then I'm going to lay it down. I am going to control it somewhat. I don't really like this, you know, this diagonal line that's come right through it. That's bothering me. So I'm going to scrumple it a bit more in the middle, just to break that up. That's better. And then I'm just going to smooth it with my hands, and do you see, even when I'm smoothing, those creases are staying because it's linen. You know, we all know linen, and what, you know, we're using the quality of linen to our advantage. Now I do believe Bonnie, having looked at her Instagram feed, then takes a fabric marking pen, you know, the ones that disappear in some way, and traces some of the lines. So you could do that. I'm not going to. I'm going to just work with the wrinkles. Hope you can see the wrinkles. I'm just checking. Yeah, you can see the wrinkles. So I've got my number 9 ready threaded. And for anyone who's new here, the invisible baste, I'm going to just go around the edge just to hold the 2 layers together. Is a small stitch on the front, and I usually take a little back stitch. So that's literally 2 or 3 threads of cloth, and then a big stitch on the back of about 3/4 of an inch. And the advantage of the invisible baste is it's invisible. You don't have to take it out. You just leave it in, and it kind of just joins the 2 layers of cloth together and gives you a nice surface to stitch on. So I'm just going to stitch around the edge of that. And I guess you can see while you're working if the wrinkles in your cloth disappear a bit. You can always just crumple it again. I just thought it was better to crumple the top layer on its own and then stitch it to the backing, but you know, we'll see as we go along. We'll see what happens. We're on a journey of discovery. I've got a fred hair. That is, I said that on Wednesday, that he likes to lay here, especially in the morning, on the table, because his food's there, so that Stella can't eat it. And the sun comes through this window in the morning. And you can hear the fridge because it's, you know, 2 yards to my left. But well, I asked for feedback on Wonky Wednesday. I know you don't all watch Wonky Wednesday. Some of you only watch the Monday. And nobody minded the fridge. They said it was homely. I'm thinking that this Friday is Park Home Life. Rewind, Catherine. My rhythm at the moment is obviously the Monday projects are every Monday and Wonky Wednesdays every Wednesday, and those videos go up in my morning, so 8 or 9 AM GMT we're on now. The clocks have gone back. So, you know, if you put that time into a time, you know, into Google, you'll see what time that is for you. Park Home Life goes up every other Friday at the same, you know, in the morning. The journaling video I put up in my afternoon on the Friday, so that the new journaling series is every other Friday. So every Friday there's a video, every other week is either Park Home Life or journaling. That's the current rhythm. In the new year it may change, but I will obviously keep you informed. Hopefully, if you're subscribed, you've got your notifications on so you don't miss anything. I didn't manage to get all the way around with my bit of thread. I'm about 2 inches from the end, but that's good enough. A bit of fluff. Yeah, and I have been wondering, or wanting for some time, I want that the other way up, I don't know why. This cut off corner feels better at the bottom. Right, so anyway, I'll talk more about that in a minute once I get you going with what we're going to do. Basically, all I'm going to do now is stitch on this piece, following the lines, or some of the lines. I don't think I want to stitch all of the lines of the wrinkles. And I think I'm going to start with something that tones, maybe this pearl, this cotton pearl. Can you then see? Do you need to see? Are you even looking anymore? Have you gone back to your knitting? I think you can see well enough. Because it's cotton pearl, I'll take my bigger needle. And you can do any sort of stitching you like. I thought this was a good antidote's the wrong word. A nice thing to do after the cantha that we've done now for 2 weeks. You know, we did, didn't we? We did the sampler, and then we did last week a motif, a Nakshi Cantha inspired motif. That was quite, well, formal, you know what I mean, certain stitches done a certain way. So I thought this was nice to just go back to doing something freeform and organic. So basically you can just choose any line you like to start. I'm going to start somewhere towards the middle, I think, maybe, and just whichever line shouts at you the loudest. I think I'm going to just stitch up this line, and any stitch you like. So you could just do a running stitch. I feel like doing a back stitch. So I'm going to do a back stitch. I'm just following that line. And if you want to do fancy embroidery stitches, you know, chain stitch or fly stitch, or you can do any kind of stitch you like. Don't get knots, Catherine. I've got a lazy girl thread. But I think I want to start with, just want to define some of these lines with back stitch in the same colour. And then of course once you've got the lines, you'll have spaces between the lines, and what it really made me think of is there's a thing, and because of journaling, because I've, you know, started the journaling series as well, I've been thinking about my process, because I have to do that in order to, you know, transmit it to you, if you see what I mean. There's that fear of the blank page thing, isn't there, if you're an artist or a journaler? And I think it can kind of apply as well to fear of a blank cloth. Often if we're doing conventional embroidery, we mark a design on the cloth, don't we, and then we follow the design. But in order to work in a more freeform way, I suppose you could mark a freeform design. Right, so I've come to the end of that line. I think I'm going to jump up here. Now this line goes all the way across there, but I don't think I'm going to go right to the edge. Obviously you could finish off and start again. Actually, I've just changed my mind. I'm going to go down and stitch this as if it's a little branch off the side there. And now I've completely forgotten what I was saying. What was I saying? Tell me. Oh yeah, marking on your cloth. Yeah, I suppose you could mark on your cloth, wiggle about, but the act of just crunching it up in your hand seems to me much less intimidating in a way. Because you just, you know, we can all scrumple cloth up in our hands, can't we? And then it gives you something to go on. Seems to have gone very dark all of a sudden. I hope you can see okay. If I put the light on, which means I have to get up, I think it's light enough. And I have now worked out how to improve the lighting post-production. Doesn't that make me sound posh, post-production? I mean, when I edit, you know, when I go and take the video into my editing program, there's an option to increase the brightness. So I'm just going to hop down to here, and I'm thinking of roots, because that, when I look at Bonnie's work, that's what it reminds me of, you know, that network of roots under the ground, in a woods specifically, with all the, you know, the mycelium, the mycorrhizal root system. I've talked about that before, quite some time ago, and mentioned the work of Dr. Suzanne Simard, who's a Canadian scientist who did a lot to bring into the open our understanding of how trees and forests and woodlands are linked by a network of fungi, and how there's a symbiotic relationship between the trees and the fungi. Her book is called Finding the Mother Tree. If you're interested in that sort of thing, I highly recommend it. There's also, I think it's on TED, a talk by her, Suzanne Simard. I'll try and... Sorry, I hear noise now. What's happening? Oh, it's just a car. I thought it was thunder, but, you know, it's not a day when there would be thunder. I've hopped across. I'm going to go... I think I'm going to go up this line, but then I'm going to branch off. So you see, you can just go whichever way you fancy, but following the lines. Because of course you didn't have to crumple the cloth, you could have just started stitching and just stitching in random directions, but I just think there's something about having those wrinkly lines to go on. It's a starting point, and then you can decide for yourself. I'm going to now go this way, which directions you take. I suppose the other thing you could say it represented was a map, you know, like a map of pathways. So the wrinkles are the pathways that are there, and then it's up to you to decide which direction to go in. You don't have to go down all the pathways, you can just explore some of them. So you'll all have to tell me what you think if you're not a Wonky Wednesday person. It's the first time you've seen me stitching here on this quilt, if you like it, if you prefer it to the green cloth. Obviously, if you all have different opinions, I can't, you can't please all the people all the time, as they say, but yeah, it is nice sitting here. And, you know, to be able to use natural light, hopefully that works okay for you. So I'm almost now not even sort of pre-planning, I'm just stitching, and if a turning in the path presents itself to me, I'm deciding, do I go that way, or do I carry on the line I'm on? I'm going to turn here and come back. So to me it makes it very mindful. And yes, the journaling. Let me finish what I was saying about the journaling before I forget and go off on another tangent. The journaling series is not to replace this Monday project. A few of you have asked that. It's completely, well, it's separate, but you know, it's not the Monday project. It's not going to. The Monday project will carry on. There'll be a new Monday project next year. The journaling is something I've done for many years. In fact, I started when I first started making stitch journals, like the one that many of you have made for this project, the first stitch journal I had was a bought journal. It was made by someone, you know, I mean, it wasn't a commercially made one, it was made by an artisan. I bought it in my local art centre at the time. But then my issue became that when you put cloth pieces in a bought journal, there's not room, you know, there's not room in the spine, or there's not much room in the spine because they're designed to be sketched in or written in, you know. So then a friend of mine showed me how to make a simple bound journal myself. So that was the first stitch journal I made, and then that kind of evolved. And around the same time I was beginning my eco-printing journey, and I'm just thinking now, do I want the line connected or do I mind if I jump? I think I want to keep the line connected. Yeah, so I eco-printed on cloth to begin with, and then I started eco-printing on paper, and then I had to find a way of using the papers, you know, in my practice, eco-printed papers. So then my journals that I was making purely to house my Slowstitch pieces gradually became part, you know, plain paper and part eco-print paper. And then that evolved into, rather than just making the book as a finished object to then use to put things in, that evolved into the actual process of making the book became an end in itself, if that makes sense at all. Because a few of people have asked, what's the journal for that I'm making? Well, it's not for, it's not what's it for. I don't mean in that way, you know, that sometimes we get asked, don't we, when we do this kind of thing, what's it for, in almost a negative way. I don't mean that. You're not obviously asking that. Do I want to carry on in this thread, or do I want to change colour? I think I want to carry on in this thread. Maybe a better way of putting it is, what is its intention? Well, it's, like I said, I used to make journals to put things in. So the book would be finished, in inverted commas, and then it would be a receptacle, maybe that's a good way of putting it, a receptacle for whatever, whether I was going to write in it, or collage in it, or paint in it, or, you know, because I have all kinds of journals I do all that in, that I've made, some that I've made and some that, you know, bought journals, sketchbooks or whatever. I have things like my commonplace book that I use as a sort of external brain. There's a video on here somewhere way back showing how I made my current one, which I'm still using. But this is why I called this a personal art journal. The one in the Friday videos, that part one was last Friday, is that I quickly realised that I would enjoy making a journal just for the sake of making a journal, not with any specific purpose in mind. But then I had guilt's a strong word, but a feeling that what am I going to use this journal for? Which I don't get with these stitch pieces, you know. I mean, I used to, and I know many of us do think that, or feel that things should have a purpose, you know, should. And it's absolutely fine, of course, to make things with a purpose. And for me, something with a purpose could be a rice bag. Sorry. Oh, I always laugh now when I say rice bag, or a pouch, or, you know, all those things. You don't need them. You could keep your knitting or your stitching projects or your hexagons if you're making hexagons, or, you know, whatever. Your threads, you could keep those in bought bags or repurposed paper grocery bags, or, you know, don't have to make bags or pouches, but it's a functional item. I hope you understand what I'm wittering on about. A bag or a pouch is a functional item, even if it's not strictly necessary that you make one. Whereas just to stitch on a piece without knowing what it's going to be, if it's going to be anything, just for the joy of stitching on it, is something different, isn't it? So I sort of translated that when I finally liberated myself, which took a while, gave myself permission to create things, whether it was a journal or a stitch piece or whatever, without a function, just purely for the process. I'm going to go onto this line down here now. Purely for the joy of the process of creating. So the journal that I'm making, that I've invited you to join with me on the journal journey, began with the eco printing. That is part of the process of creating that journal. And so if you haven't watched the journal video, and because you think, oh, you know, it's not for me, I'm not a bookmaker, I'm not into journaling or whatever, maybe I would invite you to just have a look and see. And I'm not, you know, I'm not saying what you hear a lot of people saying, oh, watch my videos, watch my, you know, you watch what you want to watch and leave what you don't. I'm not begging for views, absolutely not. It's just that it might be that it's a different way of working that might appeal to you, even if you're not a journaler or a junk journal maker or, you know, anything like that. Because it's, if you like Slowstitch, I think you'll like it. And I hope you don't feel like I'm trying to give you a hard sell, because that's not my intention at all. Because when I create these art journals, and a personal art journal, when I say personal, I mean it's telling a story, it's telling my story in some aspect of my own story. So it's a way of expressing yourself. And there will be stitching, and there will be paper, obviously, and you know, there might be some writing, and there might be some drawing, be very rudimentary drawing, because I'm not a drawer by any stretch of the imagination. There might be some mark making, there might be sticking found objects in. It's just, you know, a way of creating within the slow stitch ethos. That's why I called it slow journaling. Anyway, end of advert for my journaling series. So anyway, if you've seen that, and you know, you've seen that thumbnail pop up because you're a subscriber, and you know, and it looked all a bit different because it didn't have my face on it, just had a picture of the woods and some words. I'm just trying to distinguish between the three different aspects. You know, there's the slow stitch / Wonky Wednesday, which is very much stitching, the two of them, and then there's Park Home Life, which is more of, I believe they call it a vlog. Is that like a video log? I don't know what it even stands for. Well, there's blog, isn't there? So blog is biographical log. Is that what it means? I don't know. I don't know. So I'm assuming vlog is something with video. Anyway, that's more personal, me telling you what I'm up to and taking you out and about with me and, you know, all that stuff. If you watch Park Home Life, you know the sort of stuff. Mishmash. It's a mishmash of stuff, but I don't really stitch with you or do anything like that in Park Home Life. So we've got the Park Home Life, we've got the journaling. I now feel my brain's gone into librarian mode to classify everything and catalogue it. So we've got the stitching, we've got Park Home Life, and we've got the journaling. And that's why I've tried to make the thumbnails, you know, the little screens that pop up, or the introductory screens, look different so it's clear to you all. Because I'm not going to have 3 different channels. That is what they do say, they being the internet, that you shouldn't do, your channel should be one subject because of the algorithm. I don't, you know, what I say to algorithms is derisive noise. I had the same thing with the Facebook group. By the way, if you're new here, there is a private Facebook group, and even people that don't like Facebook seem to like the private Facebook group Slow Stitch with K3N, because we're all kind and supportive, and there's no judgment and no meanness, and it's just a lovely way for people within this community that are following, you know, my videos, and whether it's the journaling or the stitching, That's a place to share deeper thoughts, to have conversations, and you know. So the link to that is also down in the More section. And I just feel that, you know, those of you in the private Facebook group, and those of you here that regularly comment, that I have little chats with here in the comments, you just kind of get to know each other a little bit better, don't you, and you bond. So if you feel so inclined and you're not in that group, go and have a look. You will be made very welcome. You do have to jump through a Facebook hoop to get in, but it's simple. It's just, all it says is, do you agree to the rules? And the rules are just about respect and, you know, the usual things. And then just that you're a subscriber to my channel. And that's only because Facebook recommends that group to the whole Facebook world. And I want it to be for us, you know, for us here that meet here on a Wednesday or a Monday or a Friday. And not just a generic Slowstitch group. I feel like I'm doing a lot of news flashes type chatting. Anyway, I'm stitching away. You know how to do backstitch, I assume. You can do running stitch if you like. You can get knots in your thread if you like. If you get one of those loopy knots and put your needle in it and pull, it's best to pull the tail that's going forward, I find, until the loop gets tight on the needle, and then you can pull it out. It's just what I've discovered. So yeah, I'm just going to keep stitching my lines until I'm happy, or until I think that's enough line stitching, and then I'm going to move on to do other things. Do I want to join up here to that, because there is a line there? I don't think I do. I think I want to leave it there. And the clock's going to chime. Only 2. Yeah, that's the other thing. If I'm going to sit here with natural light, obviously I have to do it earlier in the day. I hope the light's still okay. Otherwise I'll have to pause and go and get the ring light, but where shall I go now? I'm going to go back there and branch off there. I'm just going to weave my way through my stitching just so there's not a big loop. Poor Fred's got a little scratch on his nose and a little tiny wound. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about, but obviously I'll keep an eye on it. On the side of his face, so I think he's had a scrap with another cat. There are obviously far more cats around here, and he's got far less space than he had in France. So I expect he's just having, I think my imagining is that he's feeling a bit braver. Now he's been here a bit longer. So he's now just having some little territory battles here and there to carve out a bit of space for himself. But it does make me sad. I said, I wish he wouldn't. And just, Fred, just, you know, stay away from the other cats. But, you know, he is what he is. So you see, if you can see, look up, I'm showing you something. I've still got plenty of wrinkles left even though I've been handling it. I hope that shows up. And like I said, you can stitch every last one of them if you want to. If you enjoy doing this so much that you just wanted to stitch every last one of your wrinkles and call that done, then you could absolutely do that. But I think I want to do some fancy stitching in between. I think I'm going to focus my attentions now. I'm just looking now. Oh, we've got plenty of time, have we? Oh, yes. Not that I clock watch, but you know, I don't want to be here for 3 hours. That would be a bit too much. I think I'm going to concentrate my efforts now in the middle here of this space that I've made. So I'm going to go, I'm going to go on this line here, which goes off at an oblique angle from where I stopped there. On Saturday I went to Ilminster, to the art centre there, and Ilminster is where I lived in England before I went to France 7 years ago. And the art centre there is where I used to teach my monthly Slowstitch workshop session. It wasn't really a workshop, guided session shall we call it, and other workshops about, you know, different things. And I've also exhibited there several times, either on my own or with one other person or as a group. And also they have open exhibitions at certain times of the year, and I've had work accepted for some of those. So it's really home from home, you know, it's somewhere I'm very familiar. Although in 7 years there's one person still working there. It's mostly run by volunteers. There are some sort of management people that are staff. But anyway, there's one person there who I know, but she wasn't there yet on Saturday. Let's run out. But it was lovely to go there and spend the day. I was there a long time. It took Stella, because my friend Maria has got an exhibition on there at the moment. I've mentioned it here and there and put links down below to the Art Centre website, which is ilminsterartcentre.com. But she's got an exhibition. Now I took a video, I made a little video, and it'll be in this Friday's Park Home Life. But if you're in the West Country of England, her exhibition is on until the 23rd, I think. It's the coming Saturday. I think that's the 23rd of November. So if you would like to go and see it in person, because by the time I show you on the Friday, you know, you'll only have the last day. So that's why I'm mentioning it now. So, yeah, Maria herself was there, and then a few other friends met me. My friend Chrissy, who was the lovely friend who looked after me when I first came back here. And Cara was there. You've seen her work in the video a little while ago, hanging by a thread, those beautiful journal dresses. And then one of our lovely community came to see me there, who had been to Symonsbury and Shaftesbury but missed me on both occasions, you know, days that I wasn't there. And we had lunch and coffee and chatting, and yeah, it was a really nice day. And that's, yeah, when I drive into Ilminster, it does feel like going home. I mean, you know, home's here. I'm not saying I'm not at home here. I am, but it's just that I lived there for how long did I live there for? 7 years, 7 or 8 years, something like that. And it's a lovely little town. If you're in this part of the world and you don't know it, it is a lovely little town. There's a lot of independent shops and cafes and antique shops, and it's just a nice little town. I might be biased. I do think it's getting a bit dark. I'm going to try the overhead light. Excuse my chair scraping. Oops. To see if it makes shadows. I think it's okay. I hope it's okay. If it's not okay, I'll do my best post-production, and if it's really dark and gloomy next time, I'll have the ring light ready. Or I'll make the video in the morning before the light starts going. The trouble is, because the clocks have gone back here, it's suddenly dark quite early in the day. That's me. When I go that means I'm thinking. I expect you know that by now. I'm quite liking this, how it's going. I'm going to end that off and go further down into the middle, I think. Some of you who watch Wonky Wednesday asked me about this quilt. When I made it, it was much brighter colours. I made it, I think it was about 20 years ago. It needs mending here and there. When okay, you're now going to get a brief history of my textile journey from age 9 to the present day. 50 years, goodness. Yes, so here we go. I started messing about with patchwork when I was 9 or so, I think. And the reason I say 9 or so is because I remember what house we were in at that age, because I remember my mum sat with her singer sewing machine in the conservatory of that house doing dressmaking. I can see her if I close my eyes, and giving me the scraps. And that was kind of 1970s polyester or crimpolene, you know, all those fabrics that people made clothes out of in the 70s. I had some natty trouser suits with brass buttons made by my mother, and dresses and, you know, floral patterned polyester, all that kind of thing. But anyway, so she would give me the scraps, you know, the offcuts, and that's when I first started with a needle and thread, just sewing them together, probably to make dresses for my dollies or whatever. Because they're little scraps, I just sewed them together any old how. I suppose it was a kind of crazy patchwork, not that I knew that term or what I was doing. And then fairly quickly, I think, you know, by the time I was maybe 11 or 12, I discovered English paper piecing, the hexagons. And my friend and I had a friend also called Catherine, who was my best friend all through school, would draw our hexagons on envelopes or, you know, scrap paper, whatever we were given by our mothers, and do English paper piecing. Now sadly none of that remains. I don't have anything. I don't know what happened to it. I know I made quite a lot of cushions. I remember a red triangular cushion that was a bit weird. I don't know why I made a triangle, but anyway. But I don't know where they've gone or what happened to them. So that was how I first started with patchwork. No thought of quilting, which isn't as strange as you might think, because patchwork and quilting, it's only in recent times that the two have been married together. And I used to, when I used to do a talk years ago, I had my sort of generic patchwork and quilting talk that I used to give to guilds and embroidery groups and, you know, sewing groups and quilters, you know, people that wanted me to come along and talk to them. Anyone who'd listen. I talked about that, the history of patchwork and the history of quilting, and how they then met. They had their own independent history and then they met. And I don't know why I went off on that tangent. Yeah. Oh no, yeah, no thought of quilting anything. And I don't know how I thought at one point I would quilt something, but I was quite a bit older. It was before Joey was born, so it was more than 20 years ago. Maybe, let's say 25 or 30 years ago, something like that. So what would I have been? I would have been in my 20s, wouldn't I? My maths is not letting me down. And so I thought, oh yeah, I need to quilt one of these hexagon things. Now I do have one from then. And it's rolled up under my bed. And now you're all going to want to see it one day. It's all kinds of cloth that I wouldn't look twice at now. It's sort of purples and reds, and it was all leftover bits, given or scrounged, or, you know, I don't know where it all came from. But all different kinds of cloth, a lot of polyester, sort of gold lame and weird cloth with sequins in, and weird, you know, it's just not my taste anymore, let's put it like that. It doesn't mean that it's not weird. People, I of all people have no right to call cloths weird. Now I can see shadows. I'm going to pause and get the ring light because I'm worried the light's going to be awful. Excuse me, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about the wires. Get them out of the way. Yeah, I had to set it all up a bit wonky because, yeah, anyway, loads of technical reasons that you don't need to hear because it's not very interesting. Anyway, so I hope that's better now. Sorry about the light change and no shadows. Yeah, in future, if I'm going to sit here, I'll have to do it in the mornings. Anyway, where was I before I rudely interrupted myself? Oh yes, this quilt. So I had this hexagon thing that I'd made, which is now rolled up under my bed, and I thought, oh, I'm going to quilt it, because, you know, that's the thing. So I went to the local sort of fabric shop, homewares, whatever place, haberdashery type place, and they had, you know, wadding, and what they had was on a big roll, and you bought it by the yard, and it was polyester, and there were different thicknesses you could have, because it wasn't a proper, you know, local quilt shop or anything like that. It was just in fact it was Dunelm, which has evolved now into something completely different in the UK. Well, no, they still have fabric and things, but in those days it was in this warehouse. Stitch and talk, Catherine. Sorry. In those days it was in a sort of warehouse type building, and it was really dark and, you know. Anyway, so this wadding came in thin, medium and thick. And I thought, oh, I want it all lofty and fluffy and lovely. I'll buy the thick. So I bought this polywolly wadding. I'm going to stop there with my lines. It looks done. I bought this polywolly wadding and took it home, and for the back someone had given me polywolly cotton in a sort of lilac-y colour. Am I still in the middle of the frame? Yeah. And so I put the 3 layers together, and I did it with safety pins, I think. It was, you know, it wasn't internet, or there probably was internet, but I wasn't looking on the internet or learning properly how to do things. So I just made it up. And then I quilted it, I think, around, it was Granny's Flower Garden, you know, a hexagon in the middle with 6 around the edge, and then planes in between. And then I quilted it, I hand quilted it, and it's, honestly, I will show it to you one day because you probably will want to see it now I've given it such a such a glowing review. Okay, so before I carry on the story and get to the point, which is this quilt, I'm now going to do some other stitching in some of the spaces, I think. I think I want a darker colour. Do I want to use this? I want to use a finer. I'll use this red onion silk dyed thread. And what kind of stitches am I going to do? I might echo some of the lines with running stitch to start with. Do I want this single or double? Oh, it's single. So now, getting back to the matter in hand, before I finish my story, I'm being careful not to unplug. I've got the light plugged in. The plug's to my right, and the lead for the light is to my left. So hang on a sec. I'm just getting it under my legs. Which is easier said than done. Where is it? It's like I'm skipping. I feel like I'm doing jump. You call it jump rope in the States, I believe. We call it skipping. That's better, because I could feel my legs pushing against it and I didn't want to unplug it and plunge us into darkness. Right, what am I doing? I'm just going to start somewhere. Probably not along the whole length. I might just start here. I don't know why. It just feels like where I want to start. I think I'm just going to do some little running stitches So basically, you know, you can do anything. You just have fun, just make it up. Start with your wrinkle lines, as many as you think you want to do, and then look at the spaces you've made. Do what I'm doing and echo some of the lines. Do your favourite stitches. You know, if you're one of those that struggled with the marler stitch but persevered because you wanted to get the hang of it, or because you like the look of it. I've still got one foot the wrong side of the cable. Now the light's flickering. Do not look up for a minute in case the light's flickering and it's annoying. You wait till I've got my foot. That's better. I've got those trousers that you may have seen me wearing. The, you know, Alibaba trousers, or harem trousers they also call them. It's like trousers, but it's got the fullness of a skirt. Anyway, that's where I was having trouble with it catching on the cable. Hopefully we're now good. So any kudos I got by talking about post-production like I was a professional filmmaker, they're now completely lost, if I ever had any. Yeah, so what was I saying? Yeah, no, choose your favourite stitches. The marler stitch, yes. Because the marler stitch is tricky. Shades of the open blanket stitch that when we did the Gujarat embroidery with the shisha mirrors, if you were here for that. That open chain stitch, you know. That was also a bit tricksy. Some stitches don't have a rhythm that suits everybody. I think it's to do with the rhythm of the stitching as much as the technical aspect of how you create the stitch. So this week, don't do stitches that give you trouble or bother. Do stitches that you like, and if that's just running stitch, just do running stitch. Running stitch is my favourite stitch. If I had to only pick one, I don't know who would make you only pick one stitch. You know, people always say that, don't we? We always say that, oh, if I had to pick one, only one. Like someone's going to come along and say, right, choose now one stitch, that's the only stitch you're allowed to do for the rest of your life. Who's going to do that? Hopefully nobody. So there, I've gone to the end of that line. I might carry on a bit. Oops. So yeah, if you want to do all running stitch, do all running stitch. If you're a huge lover of French knots, do French knots. If you like doing fancy embroidery stitches, do fancy embroidery stitches. Do you, absolutely do you. And I think that's a lovely little thing to do after the, like I said earlier, the formal embroidery. Might come down here a bit and echo this line with some running stitch. But once you've got that wrinkle outline, whether you've chosen to do it in backstitch or you know, in some other way, I'm now thinking about those of you with vision issues and the wrinkles, and I'm now wondering about how you would be able to do this prompt if you can feel wrinkles in cloth. If there is a cloth that you could wrinkle, that you could then feel the wrinkles and follow them. I'm thinking maybe if not, you could maybe stitch the lines with something thick. And the why I thought of it was because under my thumb here, this back stitch in this 8-weight pearl cotton is really pronounced. I can really feel the ridge of that back stitch. And that made me think of, having done the blindfold stitching, of people, you know, who have partial or no vision at all, no sight at all. But yes, you do you. Choose stitches you enjoy. And I hope I said last week that you don't have to do all the stitches in the motifs. You don't have to, you know, you could have just done your motif and just use running stitch if you wanted to. But I know some of you have commitment to the cause and feel that you want to stretch yourselves, which is great. But this week, just do stitches you enjoy. And I'm enjoying following this line, or echoing the line. I think here, because I've got this little side shoot coming off this way, I'm going to stitch up to there and do a side shoot in this colour. So this is why it reminded me of how I stitch on eco print cloth when I do, you know, stitching that where I'm just following the shapes in the cloth, because you've got the prints and the marks in the cloth to inspire you. Yes, I like that. So you see I've got my back stitch there, and then I've got this stitch going that way, rather wonkily, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to just jump over there. And another thing I often do when I'm doing this kind of stitching is stitch until the thread runs out and then change to a different thread. So you're almost letting the thread dictate. It's kind of limiting your choices, limiting the decisions you have to make so that you can engage with the process and the materials. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. I'm going to stitch till this bit of thread runs out. And I'm going to go back to what I was telling you about the quilt. So anyway, I quilted this horrific purple hexagon thing, which now is under my bed, rolled up, and which was a lot of polyester. And you know, if you've done hand quilting, you will know that the loftier the batting or the wadding, the more difficult it is to do nice quilting. And that was my first ever effort at hand quilting, and I chose the thickest, and everything slipped and slid because it was all polyester, and oh dear, it was just a nightmare. It didn't put me off though. You know, and later I discovered lovely cotton and wool battings or waddings and used those, and you know, I learned from my mistakes and got better at it. So I carried on hand quilting. I made various quilts. When the children came along, I made quilts for them. They've both got still their quilt that they had made when they first went into a big boy or a big girl's bed. Actually, I'm going to end this off now. I said I'm not going to, because I've come to the top of the thing and I don't want to stitch back down again. I'm going to go over here with it. I'm actually going to take it out and rethread it double. And why that, and just not the two ends? Because I find if you thread one end through and then notch the two ends so that your needle's at the loop end, that is when you get tangles and things. So I always find it better to thread the two cut ends through the needle and put my knot in the loop end. I'm going to come in here, this space. No, I'm going to go in that space. And do some seed stitches, I think. Not very many, because there's not much thread now. I've doubled it up. Whoops, got hold of my knot. There we go. Yeah, so I carried on hand quilting, patchworking and hand quilting, and my most, if not all of my patchworking was using the English paper piecing technique. And I even used that technique to do squares and things, because that was what I knew. And it was only really when I went to France the first time that, and went to a stitching group there, that I learnt to piece by putting two bits of cloth right sides together and sewing a seam, rather than, you know, over a paper template. So then I did it like that for a while, hand piecing or a combination of, and then I did start looking at YouTube, the University of YouTube, and for other ways of doing, you know, and that's where I discovered that you can sew cloth together on a sewing machine. Well, obviously I knew that, I'm being silly, but that you could do patchwork on a sewing machine. So I had, you know, just a simple domestic sewing machine, not very fancy, and I had these cloths. But there was a friend I had at the time was a keen garment, you know, dressmaker, and she gave, and some of these were from her, I think, but then some of them I did buy. In those days I bought new cloth, and some I bought in a shop that was not far away from where I lived in France. Well, you know, not far away by French rural standards. I think it was about an hour away. See, I like that seed stitch now. It's just brought in a different texture. Am I in the middle because I've moved over? I think I want some French knots. I'm going to do some French knots in this thicker, darker thread. So yeah, so I had all these bits of cloth, and I had a book, and I haven't got it anymore. I've given it away at one point because it had served me well, and I no longer used it. I think it was called something like 501 Traditional Quilt Blocks, something like that. And it was in English, although I got it in France. I think I got it from sort of, in France there were sort of expat groups, you know, British people who would meet and socialise and so on. And my mother was in one, she still is, I don't know if she still is, I don't know. Anyway, my mother was in one, and I think it came from one of their social gatherings where they exchanged English books, because English books are obviously hard to come by in France, and she brought it for me. So I went through it. This is a long, you wish you never asked. You wish you'd never asked about this quilt on my table. So I went through it and I picked out a few of the patterns that appealed to me. That's obviously just a 4-patch. I'm showing you the quilt if you haven't all gone to sleep and you're interested. Look up. And I think, because some of you asked, was there a pattern? Well, no. So there's a 4-patch. Can you see that there? Well, here's maybe clearer. So there's a 4-patch with 2 fabrics there and 2 fabrics there, and some rust staining, not done deliberately. And then there's a square and a square. So there's centre square on point with 4 triangles. And this was before I knew the way that I showed you recently on Wonky Wednesday, how to make half square triangles easily. Actually, those are quarter square triangles, but anyway. And then there's this. Look how wonky that is. Look how wonky. Anyway, it's part of its charm, which I can't remember the name of the block, but anyway, it was a block from the book. And then there's this block. Can you see? I hope you can see the 4 that I'm pointing to if you're remotely interested. Now this is just the same as this, only here I've just changed up the fabric. So here I've used the same fabric here and here, so it looks like a square. It would if I'd sewn it together well. And this one they're going that way. They're just reoriented. So basically there's 3 different block designs. So the 4-patch, the square and a square, and this that I can't remember the name of, which has got, it's got 4 triangles, and each triangle is made up of 4 other triangles. Does that make sense? Maybe if you look at this one. So there's 2 half square triangles making a square, and then 2 other little triangles making that square into a bigger triangle, and 4 of those joined together. And then I made those, and then I joined them all together, and then I put a border on it. I'll show you the border with this lovely colour of cloth that was much darker at the time, and I hand quilted. I'll show you the back. I hand quilted some squiggly lines around the edges, and I hand quilted around some of the squares, and you know, and I was a bit better at it by then. And I did the binding and everything. Because the binding and the hand quilting I've been doing for a long time. It was the machine piecing. But this was the first quilt I pieced on a sewing machine. I did get better at it. But I've always loved this. It's only little, it's barely a lap quilt. I mean, it's perfect for a table, on this table. But in France, this time I was in France, because I've lived twice in France. I lived there, I came back, I went back again, and now I've come back again. And I'm meant to be doing French knots, and I'm doing seed stitches, but no matter. It was on the terrace outside, over a chair. So it got the sun on it, and and it stayed. I think I did bring it in for the winter, but it was sort of out there all summer. We had a covered terrace there is a covered terrace on the back of the house. So it got all faded and worn, and I love it now. For all its wonkiness. In fact, I love it more than the ones I made later, where I did get good at matching points and all that. But that's me. So that's the story of this quilt. Those of you who asked. Those of you who didn't, I apologise. And I think the wadding in it is Hobbs. I used to use Hobbs heirloom. It's really hard to not pronounce the H in heirloom when you've got Hobbs in front of it. I always wanted to call it Hobbs heirloom. And that's what I used to use for hand quilting. And actually there's, oh, I haven't got that anymore. No, there was another quilt that I hand quilted with Hobbs wool wadding. But I don't have that now, that's got left behind. Right, so I've done some seed stitches in there because I forgot that I wanted to do French knots. So I'm going to do some French knots around here. I think. How many wraps? I'll do 2 because it's quite thick. It's 8-weight cotton. And I'm seeing now that my wrinkles have, well, my cloth is still wrinkly, but the definition of the wrinkles has now more or less gone. If I wanted to follow them with stitching, some of them are still obvious, but some of them aren't. So if you want to, stitch all your wrinkles, do pay attention to it if they're disappearing. And like I said, you could either use a pen or a pencil and draw them in the beginning, or you could just wrinkle it again if they start disappearing on you. And that obviously will depend on your cloth as well. And oh dear, there's nothing worse than, well, there are obviously things worse, but making a knot, an accidental knot when you're doing a French knot. I got away with it. The fridge has stopped and I've stopped. I think your sound has failed. Oh, the other thing that a few of you have asked me recently, I think because I've been wearing this jumper because it's got chilly here, is about my cuffs. The cuffs of my jumper. Look up, I'm showing, if you want to see my cuffs, look up. This jumper, what in England we call a jumper, in Britain we call a jumper, in the States I think you call it a sweater. We've talked about jumpers and sweaters before. Jumpers in the States are some kind of dress, aren't they? Well, here this is a jumper. Anyway, I knitted it myself, and this was the original cuff where my little pinky finger is, and I washed it, and it was wool that had its ball band, so I followed the washing instructions. In the machine it said I could, but it shrank, and it didn't really felt, it's gone a bit bobbly actually, it didn't really felt as such, but it just ran up a bit, and I think, to be honest, I hadn't done the sleeves as long as I could have done. But you see, when it ran up, my sleeve ended there, which was too short. So I crocheted a cuff on. Now I've got another sweater. I also crocheted around the bottom because there wasn't enough of the yarn really, and I just thought, oh, that'll do, pig. And because I knit from the neck down in the round, if you're a knitter and you're interested. And there's no pattern. Don't ask me for a pattern because there isn't one. I just make it up as I go along. This was just plain. But and then you knit down, and then when I knit down I knit the yoke to, you know, just past under the arms, and then I stop and I go and do the arms, and then I join back again, and then I just knit the length until the yarn runs out. You know, if you've got a yarn that you've thrifted or you've been given or whatever, it's a good way of doing it, because then when your yarn runs out, that's the end of your sweater, you know. And I thought, oh, that's all right, a little cropped boxy sweater, but it was just a bit too cropped and boxy. So when I had to do the cuffs, because it ran up, and it also ran up a bit at the bottom, I crocheted around the bottom as well. So this is crochet, all this is crochet. But I've got my other sweater, my sunset sweater, that you might have seen me wearing now and then if you've watched, you know, Park Home Life. It's only Park Home Life at the moment where I'm talking to you. Oh no, the journaling I'm talking to camera as well. Yeah, I've got my rainbow one, the sleeves, it hasn't run up or anything, but the sleeves just are a bit short. And so I'm thinking I might just crochet a little band just around the cuffs. The length is fine. So maybe I'll do that on camera somewhere for those of you who've asked. Now, even if you can't crochet, this is just a single crochet and a chain, or a double crochet they call it in England. But I use US terms because I learnt to crochet from a lady on the internet who is from the US. And also they make more sense to me than English terms. So anyway, so I might do that at one point. There is actually a video of me doing this sweater, but I've never made it public. I filmed it a long time, well, earlier this year, quite a long time ago, when I did it in France, and it sat there in my, in my YouTube, in my private YouTube. And I thought, oh well, I'll keep that in case I'm ill, or in case something happens one week to prevent me from doing a video, I can use that so you're not without a video. I mean, it'll be me crocheting a sweater or a jumper rather than stitching or something, but I thought, well, it'll be better than nothing. But now I'm sort of, I don't really feel like publishing it. I don't know. I'll watch it again myself because I filmed it in France and I'm not there anymore. Maybe I'll watch it again myself one day and see how it comes across, how I come across. But anyway, for those of you who've asked about the cuffs of my jumper, I have got another one that requires the same treatment, only not as much. And so I may well share that probably in Park Home Life if I do, because Park Home Life is the mishmash, as we know. I think I'm going to do a cluster. I've followed the line there, but now I feel like I'm going to do a cluster of French knots. It does to me now look like a little map, I'm now thinking of Hector Cole's maps in the book Cantha. Those of you who've seen that book or have looked Hector up on Instagram, don't get a knot. Which I hadn't, I hadn't made the connection before. Interesting. Bonnie, if you go and look at Bonnie Sennott on Instagram, whose idea, well, I don't know how many other people are doing it, but she's the one I know of, thanks to Fiona. You'll see that she does quite sort of satin stitch in the spaces, or long and short stitch, or thread painting, whatever. So maybe if you want to have a look at hers, her work first. She does. It's not all she does. She does other kinds of embroidery on linen. So if you search the hashtag Wrinkle Embroidery, then I think she's the only one really using that hashtag. Do I want to fill this whole space with French knots? I think now I'm going to do some seed stitch. If French knots are a bit standy outy, you know, a bit big and dominant, then my solution often is to just put some seed stitches in around them. And that kind of forms a transition almost between the, you know, the big lump of the French knot and the background cloth with nothing on it. So if you do a stitch, any kind of stitch, and you think, oh, you're a bit in your face, like I've often said, usually the answer is more stitching. So I could equally have done some seed stitching around them in a paler colour, you know, more close to the background colour, or I could go through and do one wrap French knots in among them, or I could go and do, you know, one wrap French knots in a paler colour. Just think, you know, just experiment with things like that. If you see now, as I'm surrounding them with seed stitches, it just makes them, I think, sort of blend better, not blend, but fit in better. It gives them a backdrop. They just look happier there rather than as if they've just been plonked. Do you see? And again, it's like we started with wrinkling, and we used the wrinkles to inform the first lines of stitching, and then we used those lines of stitching to inform the next lines of stitching, and then I've gone filling in spaces that I've visualised. I mean, that was an open space, I haven't, you know, filled the whole space. And then the stitches that I made there, instead of thinking, oh, they look awful, or heaven forfend, take them out, I would nearly never do that. Now I like that, I want to go and put more there. But so each step is informing the next step, and that's part of the paying attention, I think, and being mindful, and looking at your work and thinking, does that make me happy? Great. Does it not make me happy? What can I do about it? And the what you can do about it isn't necessarily take it out. It might be add more stitching. Now, because that's a line, I think I'm going to do little vertical stitches in the spaces. Like this. And by pure chance, although this is the same thread, the knots were a dark, excuse me, were a dark area of the thread, and these little lines in between are a lighter area of the thread, because it's a variegated thread. There we go. See, I like those better now. I think they fit in better. I've got that lovely orangey onion skin there. I'm going to end this off. I'm going to leave that in that needle because it's, I know it's my number 9. Yeah. Thought I'd picked up a thicker needle for the pearl, but it's my lovely bent number 9, so I shall evict that thread temporarily and some of this orange from onion skins. A few people have watched the onion skin video. I don't know if that's new people or people who've started watching the journaling series, because I've now created an eco-printing playlist where I've put all the eco-printing, no, I want this double, sorry, unthread that and rethread it double. Yeah, dedicated, because now there's the eco-printing, the 2-part that I did recently, excuse me. There's the onion skins, and there was the rust and tea. I thought there were enough videos. Oh, sorry about that. There are enough videos to warrant its own playlist. And I linked to that playlist under the journaling video, so I think that's maybe why the onion skin video is getting some attention. And yeah, somebody, one or two people asked, I think, about the smell. Does it smell of onion? Or no, because you only use the papery part of the skin. And if you actually get a handful of the papery part of the skin, you will discover that it doesn't smell of onion. It only smells of onion if you've got some of the, you know, the wet fleshy part in somewhere. What do I fancy doing now? I think I might do some blanket stitch along this line. No, I want it to point the other way. Let's do it along this line. No, let's go back through and come out again. What I should do is cut my knot off or unthread my needle. But I'm going to just get back through the same hole. And it hasn't pulled out, but you know, you can't see it. I can't think which way I want to go now. I'm going to go here, this way. I'm going to come up there, and then I'm going to do blanket stitch. So blanket stitch, you come up, you visualize a triangle and go down, and then you come back up on what would be the right angle of the triangle, making sure your thread's trapped under the needle. There is a video in the Slowstitch playlist about blanket stitch, and we also did it in one of the week's comfort cloth, wasn't it? But it's not only for edging blankets. Whoops. And I'm doing all the legs different lengths. Some short, some long. I'm getting caught around my corner. And having done cantha, when I've done enough embroidery on this, or shall we call it fancy? I think that's why I say fancy stitching rather than embroidery. It seems less, embroidery feels like there'll be rules, you know, and proper ways of doing things. Whereas fancy stitching sounds a bit more slapdash. Language is important, isn't it? Now my thread's having it wobbly. That one? No. Yes, I feel like when I've done my fancy stitching that I want to do sort of the cantha 4, the cantha quilting stitch into the background. But I think I'm going to have to do that off camera. I can't remember how long it was when I stopped to get the light. And then come back and show you. Yes, I'm enjoying doing this, and I want to do a lot more. And that is one little issue that I have. I mean, you obviously have, if you're following, you know, on a weekly rhythm, you have the whole week. I mean, obviously you don't stitch all day, every day. I'm sure you have other things you have to do with your lives. But I do what I do in sort of more or less, nearly always, in the allotted time. But sometimes I feel that I haven't done as much as I want to do. So next year I'm going to address that. I have some ideas as to how to do that. The videos are all going to be 5 hours long. No, that's not the way. That's not what I'm going to do. But yeah, it's a little bit, not frustrating, but sometimes I think, oh, I've stopped too soon. I wanted to carry on, you know, because of the timing. I'll do one more little stitch around that corner, so it's getting a bit short, and I'm worried I'm going to pull it out. So I feel I want to do more in here. I am going to do that. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. I hope I'm not getting a cold or something. I've got a tickly feeling in my throat. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea, and I'm going to do more stitching on it, and then I'm going to come back and show you what I've done, and put it in my book, and also tell you my quote, which, yeah, it's a quote actually that I've got in an old stitch journal of mine that I've used before, that occurred to me. So, you know, you won't see anything other than that little fancy page turny type thing to show that there's a break in the video, but I'll be back in a mo to show you the finished piece and put it in the book and tell you. Okay, I'm back and I'm at my desk, and it's many hours later and all kinds of stuff's been going wrong. My editing app's been playing up. Anyway, you don't need to hear all that, but I have done a lot more stitching. I shall just show you. So I did more of the blanket stitch going down here as well, and then in that same orange thread I did some running stitch, working sort of all the way through, and then I came in with that pale pink and did more seed stitching, and I did some of these little stick stitches, you know, vertical stitches, and with the dark brown I did more running stitch as well. And then I came in with this very pale grey and I did some seed stitching with it, and then I outlined the whole left hand side basically, and I didn't do anything here, but I've left my thread attached because that's where I'm going to stitch it in. So yeah, apologies for the lighting changes and the location changes, and yeah, it's been a bit higgledy-piggledy, but hopefully we'll get there. Hopefully my app will, I'll have to uninstall it and reinstall it, but I didn't dare do it obviously while I had a video in there in the process of editing, in case I lost it all. That would have been not nice at all. So I'm going to stitch this to here, and then I'm going to tell you the words. Am I now in frame? And I hope, yes, I just really hope you enjoy this, and that there was enough guidance, because it's not a step-by-step by any means, but the main guidance is to just, you know, start with the wrinkling and the stitching following the wrinkle lines, and then just see where it takes you, and have fun with it and enjoy it. Come on, journal, don't give me a hard time. I need to find my bulldog clip so that I can clip these up out of the way while I sew things in. Oh, my thread's not long enough, but I get one more stitch and then end off, I think. It's enough to hold it there. What's the date? 18th, isn't it? I haven't got a pin cushion. Put that there for a minute. Okay. So it's the 18th. Do I want to leave that dangling? Why not? Not doing any harm. 18th of the 11th, 2024. K3N Kiss. And my quote, open it that way, is, sorry, so long ago I had to go and look up my quote. My quote is, when grace is joined with the wrinkles, it is adorable. And that is by Victor Hugo, French author. There we go. So that's our week 47, wrinkle stitching, or wrinkle embroidery if you prefer. Do go and look at Bonnie Sennott's Instagram, and have a lovely time stitching your little piece, and thank you so much for watching as always and bearing with all the technical stuff. And I look forward to hearing, by the way, green cloth or quilt, or neither. We'll see where we get to. And I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.